evening, everyone, not afternoon, because we're a little bit later today, but for a very good reason, because I have Reza as my guest. Welcome, Reza.
Hello. Hi,
Hello.
Jay. How are you?
Good morning. Oh, you're calling me Jay.
Morning.
That's easier than Jeroen, eh?
Yeah. I
Fine.
think because the Jeroen in Power BI team tell
Exactly.
me that called him Jay, so I called you Jay.
That's fine.
Sorry
I'm
about
okay.
that.
I'm okay with that. No problem. Thank you for being my guest, and thank you if you're watching. Let me know if you are watching in the comments, in LinkedIn or YouTube. I always appreciate to see that because, yeah, it's a new time. So let's see if people, are willing to watch it 9 o'clock. I'm curious, and we're gonna be talking about Microsoft Fabric, an introduction. What is it? What can you do with it? And especially also from a Power BI perspective. So if you're working a lot now with Power BI, yeah, you have heard about Fabric. You cannot avoid it. But so what? What can you do with it? What is it? What are the nice things? And Reza will share knowledge about that. So thank you, Majid. Thank you for letting us know that you're watching. Great to have you. And if you like this kind of content, then don't forget to press this like button, of course, on YouTube or LinkedIn, or subscribe to our channels. And if you want to learn more about Power BI and next year also more about Fabric, then check out our learning platform, PowerUp. You're welcome. Reza, before we start with Fabric, because I see you a lot online also, you just reached 50,000 subscribers on YouTube, so congratulations on that. But you also make a lot of interviews with people all around the world, because you traveled all around the world this year. And what is something that, if you look back at 24, what is something that you think, well, that is very cool that this happened or is announced? What?
Well, I think one of the good things that happened was the bringing of Azure SQL databases now into Microsoft Fabric. That even broadened the area of Microsoft Fabric. It pretty much happened end of the year, like a few weeks ago in Ignite, but it happened. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Because that was something that's really missing then before.
When we talk about building a holistic data analytics solution, operational databases is also part of it. When you want to build that operational database system, you still have to build it outside of Microsoft Fabric in Azure SQL database and then mirror that data into Fabric. Whereas now you can have that in SQL in the database provided inside this Fabric environment, and then use that to be the source of your Lakehouse, warehouse, do the rest of your analytics all in one place rather than mirroring and connecting to other places and things like that.
All right. Cool. And for Power BI, what do you think for Power BI?
For Power BI, I think one of the exciting things is what is about to come. So in the chat that I had with Mohammed Ali from Power BI team, and that video is already in our YouTube channel, he talked about they are working on this feature that in Power BI desktop we would be able to have, let's say, the data model, the diagram view in one screen, and then DAX or visualization in another screen, which is really helpful. It's such a small thing, but very helpful, because now, like whenever I want to write a measure or things like that, I always have to go back, look at the diagram, and then come back and write the measure, things like that. Now that you can have, not now, but in the future soon, that we would have this feature, it would speed up the process much faster. And being a Power BI developer, I think that is one of the most favorite things that I want in Power BI.
Yeah, and I saw the video indeed, and he mentioned, this is really a high priority community request, and we are really looking into it. So I'm also curious when you have multi-window indeed. I'm gonna you will show us some demos on Fabric and what it is, and so I would like to ask you if you can take us through some more information and show some demos. So I will add your screen now. So take us through it, please.
Awesome, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this presentation is more about like what are the aspects of Microsoft Fabric for a Power BI developer, because Microsoft Fabric is such a broad tool set. I'm mainly focusing on the Power BI experience of it. A little bit about me. I'm Reza Rad. I'm a Microsoft Power BI and Fabric consultant. I do training all around the world, private training for organization or public training. I have written some books. I'm a Microsoft MVP and regional director. All of this information can be found in RADACAD website, so I won't explain a lot on that subject. I'll move to the next part, which is introduction to Fabric. So what is Fabric? Fabric is a unified data analytics platform. It's a platform that we can use inside Microsoft environment, inside Microsoft Cloud environment, which is Azure-based. We use this platform for all the things that we need to build an analytical solution, from capturing the data, connecting to the data source, getting the data, transform it, even if it is at the scale, moving it into a storage place, things such as a Lakehouse, where we can store raw files plus tables, doing some data transformations, using the data engineering aspects of it, building a data warehouse, which is more like a star schema dimensional model. You may be able to, you may want to do some data science processes on it, building machine learning models, training it, running some practices on it, and then operationalize this and then reuse it. If you may want to have real-time analytics solution in it, you can have that too. And Fabric databases is also added. And finally, we'll have Power BI for visualization and the self-service part of it. All of this is built in one platform. We don't have to switch into Power BI Desktop to build something, then go to Azure Data Factory to build something else, then go to Azure Machine Learning to build something else. All of that is in one platform. It is under one licensing plan. All the data stores in one layer called One Lake. It is governed by Purview as an additional feature. If you want to get that, you'll have more governance around it, and Copilot are available in different parts of it as well. So that is what the Fabric is in general. Now, in this presentation, I'm not going through all of that because it's like a lot to go through. I'm talking about the aspects of Power BI. So I'll talk about the Data Factory a little bit, data engineering, and the Power BI. So the things that I want to show you is, first, I'll build a Lakehouse, which is more like a storage. We'll load data into that. We'll use Dataflow to load data into that, a data pipeline to orchestrate the process, shortcut to use an existing object, and the new type of connection we have in Power BI that supports that, which is called Direct Lake. So let's go through that. So when you have Microsoft Fabric enabled in your environment, when you go to the Power BI service or Power BI website, you'll have this option to switch between different workloads, or you can click on Microsoft Fabric. You'll see all these different workloads that you can choose from. For example, I'll start with data engineering workload. Here is the place that I can build a Lakehouse, which I'm going to call this Lakehouse Get ResponsLIVE Lakehouse. Lakehouse is an object like a database, with one big difference with the database. In the database, you normally just store tables, like structured data, whereas in Lakehouse, in addition to tables, you can also store files. Here you see I have tables and files. That is because we can also save raw files. These can be anything: CSV files, Excel files, PDF files, image files, video files, anything. In this example, I'm not using the files part of it. I'm just using the tables part of it, but you can use it for the file section as well.
And quick question, Reza. So if you would push files from your SharePoint, for example, is it then linked to that file, or is it making a copy of that file and puts it here?
At the moment, you do not have the mirroring option. You can create shortcuts to those files. When you create shortcuts, it does not create copy, but it would have a temporary copy of those. I think in the future, there are plans to work on some features that might make that process simpler. Right. But at the moment, it would be like that.
Okay, something to be aware of. Yeah.
Okay. Now, to load data into this, there are different ways. The way that I'm going to use is called Dataflow. Dataflow, if you never use this feature, is a Power Query back-end feature in, we had it in Power BI for a while. we called it Power BI data flows, but in fact, this is the new generation of that. We call it Gen 2 data flow. I'm going to rename this, call it data flow, get responsive, let's say. This data flow is an object that we can use to connect to different data sources, like any data sources that you have, not any, but most of the data sources that you have inside Power Query and Power BI Desktop are available here too. In my example, I'm using an Excel source, and I'm using this Excel file online, connecting to it here, but I can connect to anything. I can get data from a database. I can get data from a software as a service application, such as Google Analytics, CRM Online, any of those. Using Dataflow, you capture data from that source. You'll choose the tables that you want. You'll do some transformations. In my case, I'm just selecting a few tables here. Let's say product, customer.
So here you do link, so if the file changes, it will be also updated here, right? Because it's a link.
If the data changes, yes. If the structure changes, then we'll need to come here and make some modification. Yes.
Of course. Yeah, clear.
So here is the place that we can do some transformation. This is basically the same Power Query editor that we have inside Power BI Desktop. This is the same experience. Here we can do the transformations that we have up in the section above here. Like, for example, if in the customer table, I don't want all the columns. I just want, for example, let's say I just want customer key, first name, last name, I don't know, things such as birth date. Let's say if I just want these, I can select them and say remove other columns, normal things that we do inside Power Query in Power BI Desktop. And these are all explained in the steps in this nice diagram view that I can go back and forth and see what is the status of data at that particular point of time. Now, this presentation is not about Power Query, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this section. But you can go to Power Query in Power BI Desktop, copy your M script, and come here and paste it, because behind the scene of this is exactly the same M script that we have in Power Query in Power BI Desktop. The difference, however, is that when you build it here, when you build your transformations here, instead of loading data directly into Power BI, what it does is that it would load it into a destination. This is Dataflow Gen 2. Destinations can be 4 different options. It can be a Lakehouse, a warehouse, it can be a Azure SQL database, and it can be also a KQL database. In my case, because I built that Lakehouse and then built this Dataflow Gen 2 from there, that is why it created that directly from there. So after we do all the
default, it will take the Lakehouse that you just created by default, or can you have multiple Lakehouses?
That is right. Yeah. If I want to change it, I can click here and change it to a different Lakehouse. Or
all right. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So after you build this, then we go and publish this. So what happens when we publish it is that it is storing this structure as a JSON file behind the scene. A data flow is stored as a JSON file. I had some other data flows before, that is why they are there, but this is the one that I just published. So it saves as a structure. Once the structure is saved and finished, then it would go through a refresh of data. It would read that from the source, it applies some transformations, and then load that into the destination, which would be our Lakehouse. While it is doing that, I also explain a little bit about the Lakehouse object itself. The Lakehouse that we have created is actually 3 separate objects. One is Lakehouse, one is a SQL Analytics endpoint, which is a connection to that Lakehouse only to the database part of it, and the other one is a Power BI semantic model. These 2 are automatically created when you create a Lakehouse, and they provide a better access to the Lakehouse structure. The one that we saw before, this window is what we call as a Lakehouse Explorer. This is a place that we can see the tables, the files, anything that we have here. Now, that data flow is still refreshing, so I'm not sure if we have any data, but let's just refresh this to see if we have any of those tables loaded. Okay, no, still refreshing. I can go and check it. This should be at the refresh stage. Yep, you see this is now doing the refresh. So we should actually have those tables appearing here So yeah, here it is. So then I can click on any of these tables and I should see the data of these tables as like a preview of the data. That is what this Lakehouse Explorer is about. It's a place that you can click on the files, click on the tables, sometimes see the preview of the objects you want here. You can also set some security if you want to, but that's about it. The Lakehouse Explorer doesn't give you much options in terms of data exploration, if you want. So this is like a preview of the data. But if I want to do more data exploration, I can go to here and switch to something called SQL Analytics Endpoint, which is one of the objects created automatically with the Lakehouse. When I select that, what happens is that this will navigate to a different view. This is the SQL Analytics Endpoint view. In this view, I do see everything like a database. Here you see I have schemas. I didn't really create any schema in this. It had the DBO default schema that everything I created went under that. But I could create, for example, one schema for my fact table, another for my dimension. You might create one schema for, let's say, CRM data, another schema for sales data, things like that, right? There are different practices that you can create schemas, and you can set security based on the schema as well. But we won't go into that details of the schema.
The advantage of Fabric is that you have it all in one environment, and you can switch to whatever suits your needs.
That is correct.
Automatically created and can do different things with it instead of using different tools.
Yeah. So these are my 3 tables here. I can also create SQL views, functions, stored procedures, like a normal SQL Server database. I can connect to it and write my SQL command. Even if I click on here and say I want to write a SQL query, something such as select top 10 star from team customer, or if you want to like join queries together and write a complicated SQL code, you can do that. And once you write your code, if you want, you can save it as a view so that you can reuse it. Or you can just use the code to just do some exploration. Now, this is
do you think, Reza, because I think that's one of the key questions I have been having for the last 2 years.
What was the question?
There's a lot of, no, I'm going to ask it now. So there are a lot of people, of course, creating Power BI reports and loading data into that. Do you envision that part of that group will make use now of Fabric instead of doing that only in Power BI? Because there's now a little bit of split between, okay, maybe people working in Power BI and people data engineering.
Yes, yeah.
You think that is moving, that more people that are doing Power BI will also move into this Lakehouse? And
correct, yeah. There are different benefits for doing that. One of the benefits, multiple benefits. One of the benefits is that separation, as you mentioned. Like previously, if I wanted to build all of this, it was inside Power BI desktop building everything, right? Connecting to the data sources, doing data transformation in Power Query in the desktop, loading data into Power BI, writing my DAX calculations, doing visualization. And that is not a good environment if you want to reuse some of your components. Like what if you want to reuse the product table that you have created? Now, with this, you can have that separation. You have the data flow for separating just the ETL part, the data transformation part. You have the Lakehouse or warehouse as your persistent database storage, that the data comes into here. Your Power BI can use this data, but other applications can also use this data. So it's much more reusable. That is one of the benefits. The other benefit is that if you ever want in your Power BI solution to implement some of the advanced data warehousing scenarios, such as slowly changing dimension type 2, things that, for example, your customer in a sales system was in this city, now the customer moved in a new city. You don't want to just update that city, because if you update the city, then you don't have the history of that customer. You want to keep that existing record, add a new record with a from date, to date, things like that. Implementing something like that is extremely difficult in Power BI because there is no persistent database. Whereas here, using Lakehouse and Warehouse, using SQL scripts, it's much easier and much more intuitive place to build that.
And do you think it's accessible enough for the average Power BI developer to start moving a little bit into this area? Or is it maybe more people that are into data engineering anyhow already now that they will
No,
use?
it is accessible, especially because writing these SQL queries can be written like that, or they can be also created using an approach which is called visual query. So visual query, you'll just go and build the thing exactly like the way you do it in Power Query. Like here, I can say, add it here, and then I can say, well, let's go and
looks the same,
do some transformation. Once you do the transformation, this would write the SQL code for you. So even if you are not a SQL developer, you can use this approach to get your SQL code built.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, nice. And is this new in Fabric, or was that also in the other tools?
We had it back in Power BI Data Mart, but this is much more enhanced version of it, because in the Data Mart we had a lot of bugs, the things that didn't work exactly they should do. So it's much more enhanced, much better experience in here.
Yeah. So it gives you more tools that are accessible for you now as a Power BI consultant.
Yes.
And maybe move a little bit back into the data. How do I call it? The data chain.
That is right.
Wrong words, but move a little bit back instead of starting at Power BI. You can move back a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And reusability. Yeah. Yeah.
Correct.
All right.
Now I want to show this, how this comes into the Power BI side of it. But before I show that to you, one of the things that you notice is that I did not bring a date table or a calendar table. And that was intentional, because I already have another database, another Lakehouse that has a date table, and I want to reuse that. This is also one of the things that we don't have in Power BI. If you want to reuse it, you either have to like copy and paste your M script and use it again, or if you are using a database table, you have to load that database table again, which all of this means redundancy in your data, sometimes redundancy in your code. Whereas here, one of the features we have in Fabric is called shortcut. I can go to my Lakehouse Explorer. Here I can click and say I want to create a new shortcut. What shortcut is actually a link. It's like a shortcut that we create in a Windows operating system. When we create a shortcut to another file, we are not really copying that file. We are just creating a link to that file. This is the same scenario. So if I create a shortcut, and shortcuts can be external or internal. In my case, I'm creating an internal one to the OneLake environment that I have. And I'm going to choose a Lakehouse that I have a date table in it. It should be, I think, something like this. Yeah, this looks like that. So as you see, this is a different Lakehouse. It is in a different workspace as well. I do have access to it. It might be something that I have created, or it might be something that someone else has created it. Then I'll go to next. This should show me the tables that I have there, and I should have a date table for this. I'll select that. And this would create the connection. This will not copy the data from that place into this, because if you remember in that original architecture, I mean, it wasn't architecture, but in that original diagram that I showed, I explained that OneLake is a storage layer for all of these. So for example, when you're data engineering, data warehousing, store data in OneLake, other applications or other workloads can use it. This is the same thing that we have right now over here, that this date table actually exists in that OneLake environment, but under a different Lakehouse. And that doesn't matter. I can create a connection to that, and when it is loaded here, it acts like any other tables. And when I click on it, I see the data of that. When I go to the SQL Analytics endpoint, I would see that as a normal table. I can even merge this with other tables. There is no difference between this and other tables, except this little icon here at the top showing that this is a shortcut table.
Yeah. And can you then, because this is from 1992, maybe my new data is only for the last 3 years, I can then use again the
correct
the SQL or whatever to say no, only load this in this years. Everything.
That is right. Yeah, you can go here and say I want in the SQL Analytics endpoint of it. You can create a view and say I want only, for example, this part of the data.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. All right.
Right. So when it comes to the Power BI side of it now, things get even more interesting. So here, just before talking about the Power BI aspects of it, I want to talk about how this structure behind the scene is. You see, all of these tables have this like little triangle icon behind this, beside them. This triangle icon is a specific icon for something called Delta Lake. Delta Lake, which is different than Data Lake, is a format of storing data, whereas Data Lake is actually a storage, right? Delta Lake is an open source standard format of storing data. Why that format is used for storing these tables? Because behind the scene of this technology, behind the scene of this, the engine that runs this is a parallel processing big data engine called Spark. The Spark is not a Microsoft technology. It's an open source platform that Microsoft uses it, but other technologies are also using it. For example, Databricks is also using it. Some other data engineering solutions are using the Spark because it's such a powerful technology. That technology, the format of data table that it reads and writes into is this format called Delta Lake. Now, what this format really looks like, every table is stored in a folder. Under that folder, we have different files. Like, for example, when I go to one of these and say view files, I can see that in this folder, I have 2 files, Parquet files, and then I have a log folder. Under that, I have JSON files. So what are these files doing? The log files, the Parquet files itself, those are the data files. These are things that store the data. Like, for example, we have CSV file that stores the data. Parquet file also stores the data, but it stores it differently. In a CSV file, data is stored like row by row, 1 row at a time, with comma separation character. Whereas in Parquet files, they are row by row based, they are column stored based. So what the system does is first capture all the data, and then it removes redundancy from it. It only keeps one unique value and create an index table saying that this value is started from here, ended at here, things like that, which would make the storage of that much more efficient. For example, if we might have, like, let's say, a CSV file that is 800 megabytes, when you convert it to Parquet, it might be 80 megabytes. It might be even less, right? Depending on how much redundant values you have in your file, you might have a lot of a better efficiency in storing it. Not only better for storing, but it's also better for reading that data. It's much faster to read that data. So Parquet files are the data files. And as you make changes in the data, as your data flow refreshes every night and things like that, what happens is that new Parquet files get generated. A log folder, on the other hand side, has JSON files, and the JSON files are having information such as this, saying that this Parquet file has been added at this time. This is a timestamp value pointing to a specific time. So this means that if you want to access the data as of yesterday, 2 p.m., even though the data got refreshed last night, you can do that because the combination of the JSON, which is the log file, and the Parquet, which is the actual data, gives you that. You can write a SQL query, and we are not doing that because that's outside of the subject of this presentation. You can write a SQL query and say, I want this data as of this particular time. This is called time travel. Very, very powerful feature, something that we do not have in Power BI. This is one of the features that you can easily use in here.
That's so cool that you can announce a feature. We have a time travel feature. That's cool.
Yes. Yeah, very cool feature. Yes.
All the nerds will. Hey, but yeah, this slowly changing dimensions also will facilitate this, what you mentioned.
Can somehow facilitate that, but in case that you have changes happening, because this only keeps the data only for the 30 days, the last 30 days, because imagine this number of Parquet files increasing a lot. And system would be slow when you have a lot of.
So the oldest one will consolidate then all the changes.
Yeah. So this history that you can time travel to is only for 30 days. Whereas if you want to do something such as slowly changing dimension, we normally want to go back even further.
All right. Okay. Now let's not deep dive into that now, but okay, clear.
Right. So this is Continue.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. So this structure is important to understand because this affects the way that Power BI relates to that. So when Power BI connects to a data source, normal Power BI connection to a data source, we have different types of connection. For example, when you connect to SQL Server as a source or any database as a source, you can choose to import the data or direct query. Direct query is available only for some of the sources, not all of them. Import data, what it means? It means that when you go and choose import data, for those tables that you selected to import, it will create a copy of those into Power BI, and Power BI stores it in its own proprietary file format. You don't see those files. It's somewhere in the program files of the machine that we have Power BI desktop installed. When we publish it to the website, it is in the cloud environment, wherever it is. But it stores it in that file format. And the way that it stores it is it stores it in a column store format because it is much more efficient to write and much more efficient to read. Now, that process is requiring a refresh because once you do that, to get up-to-date data, you have to refresh the data. And for some businesses, that refresh process is like scheduling that refresh process is not useful. They want the data live as of now. And we have direct query for that. Direct query meaning that the data is always fresh when we connect to that because we are not copying that into Power BI. We are just bringing the metadata. Power BI will build a SQL query from our visuals. We'll send it to the database. The result comes back. Sorry about this. The result comes back. And that process is slow. So direct query has a live data, but it comes at the performance cost. Whereas import data is fast, performant, but you need to refresh. Now, with Fabric, we have a new type of connection called Direct Lake. Direct Lake is only a type of connection when you have your data stored in a Lakehouse, in a warehouse, in a Fabric database. And why is that? Because the data that is stored here is already in a column store format. I mentioned that in Parquet files, they are stored in a column store format. So they have made, the Power BI team made a change in the engine of Power BI. So when Power BI connects to these sources, instead of importing it and then creating a copy of that, storing it in a column store format, which doesn't really make sense because the data source is already column store format. So instead of doing that, what it does, it actually considers that Parquet file as its own proprietary file. Power BI will not create another file proprietary to store this. That is the Power BI file, which means that this acts like import because that data is already imported there. And the other thing about it is that it also acts like a direct query because that file is the file that has all the information in it. And whenever you get the data updated without needing your semantic model to refresh, you would have your Power BI report showing the new data. This mode of connection is direct lake. Performance near import, freshness near direct query. And I'm going to show you that as the last demo here. So what I'm going to do is I'll create a semantic model. Let's call this custom semantic model.
Because I saw that you had a Power BI semantic model already, but
yeah, so there is a semantic model. That is right, yes. So that is called default semantic model. Default semantic model uses an older version of the UI when you build the that modeling experience, whereas custom semantic model uses a new version of the UI. So it is always advised to use the new semantic model, custom semantic model, rather than existing one. I have a video explaining the difference between these two as well in RADACAD YouTube channel.
Okay. Cool.
Right. So this is my semantic model. As you can see, these are the tables. When I hover on this, you see that it says the storage mode is direct lake. That is the storage mode we are talking about.
Yeah.
So you don't really need to enable or do anything about it. And when you connect to this data, that is direct lake. Here you can do normal modeling experiences, such as, for example, this is the product table. If I want to create a relationship, product key to product key, I can do that. Similar to Power BI desktop. If I want to, for example, hide a column, I can do that. If I want to go and let's say select a build and do the formatting of this. For example, this is going to be a currency format. And let's say to decimal places. You can do all of those things that you do in Power BI Desktop, like creating hierarchies, creating measures, calculation groups, row-level security. You can do all of that. The only thing that you cannot do in this environment is calculated table and calculated column. And the idea for this is that these has to be built in your ETL process. And then when you load it into your Lakehouse or warehouse, you should have those tables and calculated columns because they are pre-calculated. Only the measure calculation is dynamic, and that is the one that you want to bring in. Now, I don't want to go through creating all the relationships because I'm just going to use a simple visualization. So what I'll do is I'll create a new report on this.
Mm-hmm.
And as you see, I'm building everything in the website. You can do that in the desktop as well, but I'm just doing it in the website. So I'll have a sales amount visualization in a card visual like that. And that's, let's say that's my visualization. I'll go to the page format and I'll enable page refresh. This is page refresh. This is not the semantic model refresh. I can set that to be refreshed every 1 second. Now, what this means is that this would refresh only the page, the visuals, only the visual end of it. But if the semantic model behind the scene have the new data, this would show that, right? So I'm going to save this as something like report get responsive. Let's call it. And when you notice in this, we have a little refresh button showing something happening every second, right? So if the data changes, this should change as well. So what I'll do is I'll bring this on the side of the screen here. And on the other side of the screen, I'll go to my Lakehouse. So I want to update the data of the Lakehouse so that we see how this changes. Now, because I use the Lakehouse object to update the data of the Lakehouse, I have to either run that Dataflow if I have new data, or I can run a script using a notebook. Notebook is a place that as a data engineers, we can go and write code. The code that we can write can be in 4 different languages: Python, Scala, R, or Spark SQL. I'm going to use this just for a Spark SQL command of update. So I'll connect to my Lakehouse, and this is the Lakehouse that I have created. Mm-hmm. Notebook is a coding experience. This is the place that we would be able to choose the language we want to use. I'm just going to use SQL. And what I'm going to write is a simple update command. Update fact internet sales, set sales amount to be just a random number. But because every single transaction in that table is going to be this, that should increase this number from 29 million to a much bigger number. Yeah. Now, I used Notebook here because we have used Lakehouse. If I had Warehouse used, then I could have write that SQL command directly in the SQL Analytics endpoint. Or this update.
But if you do it in the SQL endpoint, is it then not automatically also updated into the Lakehouse then?
And if you write into SQL Analytics endpoint for a Lakehouse, you cannot do write commands. If it was a warehouse, you could have done that. But in the Lakehouse, the only way to write a SQL command that writes data is from Notebook.
Yeah. That's a little bit strange, right?
Yeah, that is the Lakehouse experience.
I have no knowledge about SQL, to be clear, but I would think.
Yeah, so yeah, and as you can see, this is updated right now as we speak. Yeah. So that difference between Lakehouse and Warehouse is just to make it different between, let's say, are you a SQL developer persona or a data engineer persona? As a data engineer, we mostly do our things in a notebook experience, whereas as a SQL developer, we might just go directly into that SQL Analytics endpoint and write our code in SQL code in here. That is the difference. Okay. But in terms of the direct lake feature, you just saw that as soon as I update this here, in just a few seconds, it updated this.
We'll,
So
we'll
that
watch
is
back how much time was
yeah.
between it, but in a couple of seconds.
Yeah, so that feature
Yeah.
is a really cool feature. It is only available when the data is stored in Fabric environment as a Delta Lake format, which makes Lakehouse, warehouse, or a database.
Yeah, yeah, cool.
So yeah, I think that was pretty much everything I wanted to explain.
Great. Yeah.
Anything you want to talk about?
more information can be found here. Yeah, you have.
Yes,
You
yes. So these are like the
5
YouTube
minutes left.
channel with some
Yeah.
videos, my blog, my LinkedIn if you want to connect, and Instagram. We are not using that a lot, but it's there anyway.
Yeah. It was completely clear. I really like that you share all this knowledge. And yeah, for me, next year, what do you think next year will be? Because I hear a lot of organizations. Okay, we're trying it out, and we're in the early phase. Maybe we are in the middle of implementing still the previous version. Should we now shift to Fabric or not? What do you think next year will happen on that area?
I think we would have more and more adoption as we go. Even this year, because we do work with a lot of customers using Power BI, and some of those customers already moved to Fabric because it has all of these new features and capabilities that they can use. Some of them already moved over there, especially if you are a customer using something like a Power BI Premium Capacity license. Fabric is already enabled for you without paying extra costs, right?
Yeah.
That makes it really simple. If you are a smaller business or medium scale businesses, it's a little bit different story because you probably need to add a little bit cost to your Fabric environment, but usually with the things that you gain benefit from, it's worth that cost. Now, I'm not going to do a sales pitch in here, but what I'm experiencing in the market, in the customers that I'm seeing, is that a lot of them feel the value of the Fabric being much more helpful in their data analytics solution, not only their existing plan, but also in the future if they want to bring all of those other components, such as real time, such as data science and things like that, you'll have it all in one place. So my feeling is that we would have more and more adoption. The adoption rate may not be exactly like Power BI, because Power BI is something that everyone uses, whereas Fabric is more like a coverage of everything, like data engineering, data warehousing, real-time data science. Power BI is part of it as well, but it would have a good adoption still, because this is the only tool at the moment, the only service at the moment in the market that covers everything in one place. Other vendors, other offerings are not like that. You have to go and purchase a Snowflake from a different company, Databricks from a different company, and Power BI from a different company, and combine them. Whereas here you would have everything in one place.
Only one, yeah. And you see also that Microsoft is really putting a lot of effort, adding more and more things like the Copilot.
Yes.
But you didn't mention a one-time Copilot yet. That's
yeah.
a lot of Microsoft venues that would have been already for 100 times now.
yeah. Copilot is used everywhere in Microsoft presentations.
Yeah.
So in this experience, the parts that Copilot can definitely help is where we had that notebook code. So Copilot could have helped us in writing that, or SQL command, or even that Power Query transformation. If you want to do any transformation, Copilot would be able to help us that as well. But the thing about Copilot in Microsoft Fabric environment is that you need definitely at least F64 in a licensing plan. So it wouldn't really work.
My wish for next year is that is a little bit lower in the tier.
I hope for that too. Yeah,
I think that will also help in adoption, because
so that more people can use it. Yes.
Exactly.
Definitely.
They did add it this week now in this VS Code. What is it called? That they added the Git Copilot in the VS Code. Is it mentioned VS Code?
Yeah, VS Code. Right. Yes. Yeah.
That it is now part of that, right? Since a couple of days.
So hopefully for Fabric they would have a better licensing option for that.
Yeah, that would be cool. Reza, thank you very much for being here in your morning.
Thank you for your time too.
it was nice to have you back after 3.5 years, because you were in episode 32 and this is 191. So, well, how time flies, I then realize.
Yes, yeah.
And so now, hopefully we'll see you sooner than in 3.5 years.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, next week, yeah, because it's Christmas, and normally we would have an episode about dashboard design, but we'll take a short holiday for 2 weeks, actually. So we're back in 3 weeks. We already have a lot of nice guests lined up. So I'll make a post probably next week with a breakdown of the next 3 months of guests, so that we have at least something to share next week. But for the rest, I wish you already nice holidays, and also for you, Reza, enjoy.
Thank
And
you.
now have a nice evening or day, depending on where you watch.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.